Hello and welcome to another video. This is episode 31 of the podcast, and I would like to start off with some health updates. So I actually injured my left shoulder last week, I believe, and I've been working on healing that by means of stretching, doing a bit of strength exercises, and what else? Yeah, I've been laying low in terms of knitting. So, yeah, I am going to be trying to get stronger. That was also one of my goals this year. So, I've been thinking about doing some more yoga and strength exercises. But yeah, I don't know when the next podcast is going to come out because I still plan to knit a bit on a lower pace or at a slower pace in the coming week or so. Having said that, let's actually dive into the things that I've knit, that I've done. Yes, okay. Yes, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is the Karla Cape by Anna Fensel that I have now completed. Ta-da! I just took off the polo so I can actually show you what I've done. This is actually the first pattern in the Isaya collection. Oh, and this is something that I wanted to talk about. So a couple of episodes back, I did say that in a Japanese book, I found that the phonetic pronunciation of Isaya was Isager. Turns out that's not the case. I found the Instagram of the Isaya store in Denmark, and the people were speaking Danish and they called it Isaya. So yes, sorry for that confusion. In any case, yes, this is from the Isaya Archives collection, and yeah, this cardigan is based off of a vintage pattern by Åse Lund Jensen called Bricker, and it's this well, you can't really see it all that well, but it's this very beautiful slip stitch pattern. So it's color work, but you actually only use one color at a time because you use slip stitches to create the the overlapping colors, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I can show you how it looks. Help me! Okay, so this is the front. It goes, maybe. Yes, so this is the front. We have the side here, and then the back. Yeah, so I absolutely love the way it looks. I made a ton of modifications. Yeah. I will talk about those, but first some general information and also a bit about the construction. So yeah, I did not use the recommended yarn. I think the recommended yarn was one strand of, I don't know. So the recommended yarn is Isaya's Eco Soft as well as Isaya's Twinny. And I decided to go for just one strand of létloppi. Oh no, istex is létloppi. Yeah, so I did that because the thing is that a lot of Danish knitting patterns, or I think just in general now, it's very popular to use two strands of yarn. And the only thing is that it makes it makes the garment very expensive, and I was planning on knitting most, if not all, of the patterns in the Isaiah collection. So I needed to be a bit more economic with my yarn. So yes, I did use Istex's létloppi. This is 100% Icelandic wool, and I used the colors Rust Heather, which is the darker color, the main color, which is 9427, and then I used barley, the lighter color, which is 1419, and the yardage is 100 meters per 50 grams. Yes, so I'll put a picture here. If you're looking at the original Karla Cape pattern, you'll see that it is very oversized. So the picture that is here right now shows an offensive using, or wearing rather, size 1, which gives her, I believe, 37 centimeters of positive ease. And calculating back, she has a similar bust to mine, and so I thought that would look a bit too big on me, especially because I am rather short, so a lot of these oversized clothing pieces make me look a bit, I don't know, it's just not really my style. So I tried making the first size a bit smaller. Yes. So the needle size that I also used was 4.5 millimeters for the body, and then 4 millimeters for the ribbing. Yes, for the ribbing all over. And for the buttons, I used 3 centimeter duffel buttons. I think I spoke about the huge mistake that I made last episode. Essentially, I made a miscalculation when it came to the body, and I took off 30 centimeters instead of 15. So I had to start all over, and now it is exactly how I wanted it to be. Yeah, it still has this drop shoulder effect, and I think it looks really good. Yes, so the modifications. Actually, I did write all of the modifications on my Ravelry page. I recently made a Ravelry account, so I'll leave a link to that in the description box below, and also a link to the specific project. Yes, so for the first modification, I just took off 4 pattern repeats all over the body. So 1 on this side, 1 on this side, and then 2 on the back. So 1 here, 1 here. And then for the arms on the original are also quite large, and I wanted this to be a long sleeve cardigan. So what I did was I took out basically 12 rows at the yoke, so that I could create a sleeve that had 60 stitches instead of the stitches for the size 1. Then I lengthened the sleeves by doing 6 pattern repeats, and then at the end I knit 8 rounds, and then I think, how many rows of rib did I do? 2, 4, 6, 7? Yes, I think I did 7 rows of twisted rib. And then another modification that I made was remove 2 rows of ribbing on both sides here at the bottom band, simply because my buttons were a centimeter shorter than those that Anna Fensel used. So yeah, it worked out really nicely. I have blocked it, washed it, and I do have to say that the yarn is definitely less scratchy after washing, so that's really nice. As you can see, I'm not wearing anything underneath for my arms, and it's not that scratchy. So yeah, those are all of the modifications. As for knitting experience, or yes, knitting experience, this was actually a very lovely piece to knit. For the most part, very mindless because you only actually have to really focus on these 6 rows here, and then the rest is just plain stockinette. Yeah, I think I've said actually quite a lot about this pattern in the last episode, and I'm also working on a knitting vlog where you can get an even more in-depth view of me knitting this. Also, one thing I wanted to mention that I really liked about this pattern for the finishing is that at the end you do a slipped stitch for 2 rows, and that creates this very pretty line here, which I thought was pretty neat. Yeah, so that's everything for the Karla Cape. Moving on to the Esther sweater. This is another Isaiah Archives collection piece. So the initial plan was to actually knit the Esther jacket, which was the piece that actually was part of the Isaiah collection. However, I found that I was about 100 grams short on the yarn that I was supposed to, or that I bought purposely for that project, and I didn't want to buy 100 grams with the risk of it not being from the same dye lot. So I did find that the sweater version, the sweater version of the Esther jacket actually used 100 grams less. So I opted to do that. And I actually think that I have some yarn in stash that I can use for the Esther jacket later down the road. So that kind of resolved itself rather nicely. I don't have to buy extra yarn, and I also get to use some stash yarn. So this pattern recommends you use again a combination of 2 strands, a DK weight yarn, and then a lace weight yarn, silk mohair, and I figured I'd just try out some other yarn. So that's what I did. I decided to use some järbo astrid yarn. This is a 100% superwash wool with a yardage of 125 meters per 50 grams. And yeah, the color is smoke blue, number 11. Yeah, so I'm just using DK weight yarn, and I actually reckon that using more of an Aran weight yarn would have been a bit nicer, but I think this is fine as well. So yeah, this is what I've done so far. Yeah. Yeah, I'm using 4mm needles for this. Yeah, I think this, you can see it a bit better. So currently I'm just working on the back. I've finished all of the increases, and now I'm just working straight down so that I can come back and pick up the stitches at the front, knit down, and then I guess attach them and then knit all the way down, and then I'll start picking up for the sleeves. Yeah, so the experience has been fine. This is the first time that I'm actually knitting a petite knit pattern. It's very wordy, a lot of words. I don't know. It's interesting knitting the Isaiah collection because every designer has their own style of writing things, and I found them to be all vastly different. Yeah, so I actually haven't knit all that much, as you can see, just a little less than 50 grams. So that's about 10%, something like that. If I remember correctly, this motif is from Åsa Lund Jensen's sweater called Struktur. I said it in a German way, but yeah, I don't know how to say it in a Danish way, but yeah, structure. And it was a men's sweater that had this pattern all over. But in petite knits version, you have some moss stitching at the side, which is a very common, I guess. I wouldn't say if it's necessarily modern thing, but you do see it in quite a couple of textured knits, especially ribbed stuff. Think wait no, especially especially sweaters that have cables. You'll see a lot of cables, and then on the side you'll have moss stitch or linen stitch. That's also one that gets used often. Yeah, so other than that, not much to say about this sweater. So moving on to the next project, and so far I only actually have a swatch. Yeah, this is it. This is for the Gerda sweater and skirt by Egyor Knits. This is also my first time knitting one of her patterns, or actually two of her patterns in this case. This is also part of the Isaya Archives collection, and the pattern recommends 2 strands of Isaya spinny and 1 strand of silk mohair. I ended up finding some brandless yarn. Yes, so this is 100% merino lamb's wool, and it has a yardage of 425 meters per 50 grams. So it's lace weight, and I'm using 3 strands of 3 strands of these on, I believe, 4mm needles. So this seems to be factory yarn, doesn't have a brand. Yeah, I bought almost an entire kilogram of this for 70 euros. So I'll have more than enough for the sweater and the skirt, and then maybe even another project. So that's very exciting. Yeah, so that's basically everything I have for this project, just as a simple swatch. Then I quickly wanted to give some updates on projects that have been slowly chugging along. First up, the sailor collar sweater pullover. Yeah, still working on the right side. Is this the right side? Yes, the right front. Almost there, almost. Yeah. And then I can start making the sleeves. As for the midwinter men's sweater, I have actually taken off the ribbing, and I am now adding to the length. I think I've done about 2 lice rows, and I was planning on doing about 5 or 6 more. And then, yeah, I'll be attaching the ribbing. I'll just be doing some grafting, doing Kitchener stitch. Yeah, so that's that. So one of my goals for this year was to design at least 2 knitwear pieces, and I haven't forgotten about that. Now that I'm trying to give my shoulder a bit of rest, I'm actually now focusing more on designing. I did manage to knit a tiny swatch over a 2-day period because I really didn't want to knit all that much. As for inspiration, things that I'm really looking at are vintage patterns. I really like the fit of a lot of 50s, 40s pieces. So that's something that I've been looking at a lot. Also, Japanese 50s and 40s patterns. This is a book that I believe I've shown before. It is from when? Can I see this somewhere? Showa 26, year 26. I can't convert that. I can't convert that. But wait. Can I? No, I think if I'm being honest, I think it is in. I found it. It's 1951. Yeah. So yes, that's something. Yeah, I've just been looking at the patterns, and so the thing is, in my 2024 knitting goals videos, I did write that I wanted to make or knit a Japanese vintage pattern, and I said I was first going to look at English knitting patterns just to gain some more experience. And now, I don't know if you can see it well. Here are some of the pieces that they have here. But yeah, now that I have spent a lot of time just looking at old English vintage patterns, and I've been actually changing the gauge and modernizing some of them, I think that I have enough knowledge now to actually look into these patterns and try and see if I can knit them. So actually, this past week I have been reading specifically through this one, and I believe another one from the 50s or late 40s. And yeah, this is it is, I feel I am actually very happy looking at them because I'm learning a lot. I'm getting to see the difference between modern and vintage Japanese patterns, and I can tell you there's quite a lot of differences, but also a lot of how would I say this, similarities. Yes, and that it's kind of funny. Oh, here you can see. Here's kind of like how the pages look, and you read from right to left. So things, you read it like this. And one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with, well, yeah, so there are a couple of challenges. One thing I do have to say that's really, really nice about these patterns is that they use schematics. That helps a lot in terms of comprehension, because just due to the experience that I have knitting, I know I can kind of, even without exactly knowing what's happening in Japanese, I already have a basic understanding of the pattern. The only thing is that the schematics, the Japanese that is written with the schematics is not printed. See, this is printed Japanese right here, but then in the schematics, it's written. And so sometimes it can be really hard trying to to recognize exactly which character is written if I don't know it. So because basically, if there's a character you don't know, you'll have to look it up via Google or whatever. So you have to write the character out and then you can see it in Google. So yeah, the things that I am finding to be quite tricky with these patterns, I think two things. First off is actually figuring out where everything stands, because you have to think about this. This is the 1950s, early. So it's been about 6 years since the Second World War. And at that point, Japan wasn't a very rich country. And so, I mean, as you've seen, the the amount of space that a pattern takes up is about a third of an A4, something like that, for an entire sweater, for instance. And so they try to cram things as much as they can. So for instance, with this, I was looking at this sweater in particular yesterday, and I think I can find it here if I'm... Okay, so let's find a better picture of the sweater. Yes. So here we are. there's a men's version of it as well. So mittens, sweater, and then the headgear. I don't know how you call it for men, but it's like not necessarily a hat. It has a vertical strip of knitting there, and then you have the woman's sweater and the mittens, and you can see the hat here as well. So all of that, 2 sweaters, 2 pairs of mittens, and 2 differently shaped hats. All of that is crammed. I don't want to be too rough with these pieces, but it's this one page up until here. That's everything for 2 sweaters, 2 hats, and 2 mittens. Well, the mittens, they use one schematic here, and in between brackets they have the stitch count for women's. Yeah, but then for instance, I find this really funny, right? So they have the instruction for mittens is, let's see, this section here. So this is everything they have for men's. And then here, this, all this stuff, like this stuff here is for another piece. But then they have here 2 lines for the women's mitten, and it just says, women's mittens, knitting instructions. They say, look at image 5 and look at the brackets. And it's written here, and then you have to go here to actually do it. I don't know, it was just such a... when you're looking at this and you're already kind of overwhelmed with all the bits and bobs that are going on in this sweater, it's kind of weird to have all this information here, and then you're knitting the women's sweater here, and then there's just this one text that's telling you to refer to this page here. I don't know, I thought it was kind of funny. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I am struggling with, it's a challenge, the way the patterns are written. It's a bit chaotic. And then the second thing that I'm struggling with is a bit of the terminology. I'm rather familiar with Japanese knitting terminology, but then again, a lot has changed in the past 70, 80 years. And there was this one example of, I think it was a sweater, and it showed the bust measurement. I think something like, I don't know, 82 cm. So it just uses the metric system. But then I was looking at the height, and then there was this character, I believe it was the character for line. And I was really confused about that. And I put it through Google Translate, and it did not make any sense. But then I just typed in the character and then knitting in Japanese. And so that's how I found out that character used to be used to denote centimeters, because the Japanese word for line is sen. So I was really confused about that, not necessarily because the character was used for that unit, because I mean, it's a fairly common thing that happens in both Japanese and Chinese. But the fact that it was inconsistently used, so because it was written in the same diagram, it said CM, and it also used the character for line. So yeah, I do have to say that I am enjoying the journey. So there's that. Having said that, I am not only looking at vintage patterns, I'm also reading this book, the Knitting Pattern Writing Handbook by Christina McGrath and Sarah Walworth, and I have spoken about this book before on the podcast right after I had purchased it, and I have read quite a bit of it. I think I've read chapters 1 through 3 and 6 and 7. So I actually only have to read the chapter on charts and sizing, and then I can actually make a full review on this book. Just to give you, I guess, like a mini review right here. This is a great book. I think this would function very well for beginner pattern writers or pattern writers, knitwear designers who want to improve on writing patterns. I think they set a very high and good standard for pattern writing in terms of being disability inclusive and size inclusive as well. Having, dabbled in online knitting communities, there has been a lot of discussion when it comes to size and disability inclusivity, and having a book that actually talks about things that a knitwear designer can do to improve on that is very interesting. They also provide resources for further reading. And yeah, I think this is just a very nice overview. It doesn't necessarily, at least how I'm reading it now, it doesn't have a very detailed explanation of everything, but I guess you can't really fault them if the book is about 150 pages. I feel like this is a very nice foundational book, if that makes any sense. Kind of similar to the Vogue Ultimate Knitting book. So you'll find the basic information that is important, and then, you can use the resources section to further your knowledge. So I'm hoping to finish this by the end of the weekend, or I don't know, by the end of next week. Yeah, so I think that's basically everything that I wanted to say in this podcast. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Bye-bye!